You're listening to the Black World Media Network. I'm Todd Stephen Burroughs, and this is Book Bundle. I've got a book review today from my friend Dr. Jared Ball of Morgan State University. He has the second edition out of The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power, the second edition. Very excited about it. America is a land of myths. I mean, as you see, our popular entertainment is filled with them. You know, one of the myths that Americans tell in these popular entertainment, one of my favorite types of myths is that someone can show up, in a superhero costume and someone's aunt or girlfriend or friend won't recognize them in a superhero costume, right? These are the kind of myths that we tell about ourselves, right? Because these myths are about how we see each other and people see what they want to see. That's what Clark Kent said to Lana Lang in the new Superman and Lois TV show when he revealed his identity to her. She goes, well, how come I didn't see it? And he said, people see what they want to see. Well, Dr. Ball's book, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power, now in its second edition by Paul Grave, talks about that we see what we want to see in the Black community. And one of the myths that has grown in the Black community is that we have this $1.2 trillion buying power. Now, Dr. Ball says that buying power is actually the ability to purchase goods and services mostly produced or owned by non-Black Americans, right? So he's challenging this myth, saying that Black dollars cannot become capital because it's about wealth, not income. This whole myth about a Black national gross domestic product, I mean, that's not real because GDP is not income, and that's what we have. We have income. And he exposes all of the studies and all of the numbers and all of the companies behind the numbers and how fraudulent all these people are. And unfortunately, not only does he show the fraudulence of these American institutions, which are promoting this myth of Black buying power for themselves so they can make more money, right, by marketing to us. He also, I hate to say it, as a lover of the Black media, he also shows how the Black media is complicit from John H. Johnson up to the present in perpetuating this myth. Why? Because Black media wants more advertising from Black corporations. So they take this myth of Black buying power and they promote it so that they can benefit. He even goes after Dr. Amos Wilson, which really put a couple of tears in my eyes because Amos Wilson is such a beloved intellectual figure in the Black community. But he points out that these numbers where we're getting all this stuff from, including Amos Wilson, they're just not correct. And not only do we have a Black media that's complicit, we even have a white media that's complicit. One of my favorite parts of the book is when Dr. Ball calls National Public Radio and challenges them on some statistics they used. And the reporter said, well, we couldn't afford to go buy the report to read and analyze the numbers ourselves. So we used the press release that the numbers company brought out. So we have all of these partners in perpetuating this myth. And Dr. Ball says that the myth is perpetuated because it allows us to focus on something that's not true, something that we can blame ourselves for. We're not spending money properly, et cetera, instead of dealing with the real issue. What's the real issue? We don't have wealth. Why don't we have wealth? Because of capitalism. Capitalism has set up an evil system that has denied us wealth through a system called white supremacy. But we don't focus on that because we blame the victim because of buying, but buying is not changing the system. Changing the system is changing the system. In the second volume, Dr. Ball has a new chapter on something that went pretty quickly as a fad in Black America, and that was cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency was marketed to Black communities as a way of Black self-determination, a new version of the old Black capitalism that Nixon marketed as a counterpoint to the Black Power movement. And so he exposes the fraudulence of cryptocurrency. I mean, it's a very painful book to read. I'm really glad that it exists. But I have to admit it was quite painful to read, and I can only wish that he does more of these. So I'm going to do something I normally don't do. I'm going to actually list suggestions for the third volume and beyond, because I think Dr. Ball needs to make this argument strongly and more clearly with more examples and maybe more chapters, because we've got to deal more with the individual versus the collective, because Dr. Ball is talking about the collective of Black America. So here are my suggestions. I think he needs to talk about how employment is not power. Even employment at black banks, which as Ball correctly describes, are small institutions dealing with small amounts of money. Another thing to be added to future volumes. The forming of economic co-ops, as ethnic groups allegedly do or did, at least in the 20th century. Allegedly, folks created co-ops that allowed them to buy every fruit and vegetable stand in New York City and things like that. Even if they did that, even if that's what happened, that is not the same as power. Guaranteed income, something that my mayor in Newark, New Jersey, Ras Baraka, is looking into, is not power. And finally, it's become very popular to talk about solidarity and reparations, and California just did this huge 1,000-page reparation report, and the wealth gap seems to be the primary thing that people talk about in terms of reparations. I also think that Dr. Ball needs to go into reparations and to talk about how reparations, particularly as defined with the wealth gap, that's not power. Again, America is a land of myths. So I just want to point out a final myth that kind of ties into what Dr. Ball and other people are talking about. The issue is that capitalism is being fed to us as salvation. You know, I've done things with Grant Cardone and Anthony Robbins, and they literally talk about if you made money, you would solve problems that are in your community. You know, you would be able to fund things. You'd be able to fund more scholarships. You'd be able to fund more food banks. In fact, Anthony Robbins talks about how his goal is to feed on Thanksgiving 1 billion people. Now, I would never be against feeding 1 billion people. Definitely not. But feeding 1 billion people on one day is not transforming the system that leaves people hungry the next day. And until we deal with that reality, we will continue to be in the dream world that mass media and corporations and marketing firms have constructed for us. For the Black World Media Network, I'm Todd Stephen Burroughs.
That was Book Bundle, a review of literary works in varying media formats, presented by reviewer, Professor Todd Stephen Burroughs, journalist, historian, and popular culture enthusiast.